Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sac Town Talks. Happy New Year's, everyone. Today we're joined by Jon Potter of the RXN Group. Jon, thanks for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Definitely. So, Jon, for our listeners who are unfamiliar with you and the RXN Group, can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what the RXN Group is?
Sure, thank you. RXN Group is primarily based in Washington, D.C., but we work nationally and internationally. We're a public affairs group. We are um, in the multi-state world. We are often working with small and mid-sized companies that don't have in-house government affairs departments, or might have one person doing federal, or might have one person doing state, but they need to extend themselves, right? So we will coordinate the lobbyists and public affairs companies around sometimes as many as 10 or 12 states or more for a company or an organization. In addition, we are constantly supporting teams by writing op-eds, placing op-eds, doing coalition work and grassroots work, activating small businesses, activating individuals, really influencing the public policy process um, with lobbying and through the lobbying adjacencies. So that's really our business. We've been doing it for 7 or 8 years. When you look at the original companies, I've been doing things like this for a long, long time. I'm a lawyer by training. I've started and run trade associations, and um, so this is what we do today.
Yeah. A lot of us, lawyers, they get into the law. How did you go from, studying law to kind of working in the sector?
Well, I probably started working in the sector and then went to studying
Yeah,
law.
okay.
I did my first political campaign when I was 13. So it was an interesting introduction into the policy process at a young age, and did campaigns through college, through law school, ran a consulting firm out of my dorm room in law school, and intended to go down the law firm route, then was going to go work for a public official, which is something I've actually never done. I was going to do that right out of law school, but budget cuts eliminated that job. And I did 10 years in law firms and then transitioned over into running trade associations and building a public affairs business.
Yeah. It's interesting. Technology is constantly evolving. It seems like a few years ago we were all talking about social media, digital advertising. Now AI has just exploded onto the scene and kind of thrown things on its head a bit. What have you seen? What are lessons learned of this, past election cycle that you've seen that you're going to use in the future to report?
So in the consumer technology space and in the general technology space, I've been in this game since the wars over the VCR, with the movie industry and the radio industry and the music industry and the movie industry. And every time a new technology comes out that is arguably transformative, um, there's a whole lot of new folks who say, "Oh my goodness, this is new. This is different. We have to rewrite the laws. There's bad things going on, or there's risks of bad things going on." And we need to throw out the old laws and bring in the new laws. And that's exactly what's happening now. AI is a absolutely transformative technology in many, many respects. But I frankly have doubts as to how many laws we actually need to change if the risks that people are concerned about actually were litigated, actually went down the path of being negotiated in contracts or in disputes, dispute resolution. Would we find that the old laws are um, unsuccessful, right? And so I'll give you an example. When Napster came out and Grokster, for those of us who remember the original early days of internet music, and I was deeply involved in the policy side of internet music, the record industry thought that peer-to-peer file sharing should be made illegal. And they went to the Supreme Court and they went to Congress and they said, we need to actually ban peer-to-peer file sharing. Well, peer-to-peer file sharing is now what we call Dropbox or what we call Google Docs, right? You and I are sharing files, and we're working on them together. So the whole point of, the people who were, quote, technology lawyers were arguing, no, 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 no. Technology is used for good things. It can also be used for bad things. We need to regulate the misuses or make sure the misuses are regulated and regulated adequately, and make sure that those laws are enforceable with respect to these new technologies. But that doesn't mean the rules are any different, right? Music theft is still music theft, whether you're copying CDs, copying old vinyl record albums, or copying music without payment through the internet. It's still copyright infringement. It's old fashioned copyright infringement. It's old fashioned theft, or it's fair use, right? The copyright law survived and didn't need to be substantially rewritten just because there was transformational technologies in how music was recorded and distributed. And I think in many respects, AI is an acceleration of software development and arguably a new technology, but it's really the application of technology, of faster technology and more robust technology to traditional activities and traditional mechanisms. And then the question is, what's the risk here? And how do these new risks, or are they new? Are they new, or are they just faster, better, scarier? Um, how do they fit into old laws? And do we need to change the laws to do that? So those are the challenges. And I think that there's a whole lot of folks who out there who don't go back, who are not, arguably as old as some of us, right? And whose history is they're hearing from folks whom they trust who are afraid of the risks. And they're trying to address risks through legislation and regulation, which might already be addressed, or which might need to be addressed in narrow ways, right? Very
Yeah.
surgical ways rather than sweeping ways. And I think those are the kinds of challenges that we're talking about in a lot of states right now.
It's interesting. They said like the fax machine was, a big death knell to a lot of lobbyists, right? Because information can be shared quite quickly. And, we just saw recently with this big congressional bill, it's with 1,200 pages. And all of a sudden, people on Twitter just start uploading it to AI, and all of a sudden, make it digestible in a matter of seconds. Um, so it's interesting, how Congress used to act with these big bills, hoping no one could read it very quickly. And you're very seeing, how AI can be used in the future of politics, kind of changing things. Kind of what was your reaction to kind of, AI kind of in its infancy here now, kind of already kind of changing how things are going?
I think AI is doing fabulous things for those of us who write for a living or who communicate for a living. So Grammarly is probably my most frequent use of AI. Um, I do a lot of writing, just quick emails. Sometimes it's memos. Sometimes it's bill summaries. Sometimes it's drafting testimony or drafting op-eds. And I think of myself as a pretty good writer, but Grammarly is a terrific tool that improves my productivity, improves my efficiency, improves my writing. Um, I think that, um, um, if you can identify through AI what's happening inside of a bill where otherwise you couldn't, right? If you can get very quick translations into simple English, will that put lawyers out of business or lobbyists out of business? I don't think so. It'll just elevate us to being strategic, right? We won't have to do summaries anymore, right? The software will do the summary. We'll just do a quick edit of the summary, make sure it's accurate, cross-check it. Hopefully, those of us who are in the profession will not be doing what those lawyers did, right? Who submitted the brief where it cited the cases that actually didn't exist. And those lawyers got fined and got smacked by the judge, right? So, those, we want to make sure that it's not being misused. But for those, I think that's true in many of the workforce situations that people are concerned about. You referenced the fax machine. When I was very young, I used to work for my dad's law firm in New York City. I was the guy who would bring the documents around to different people's offices to have them signed. I was the guy who would go to the post office to deliver, or to the FedEx office to deliver the package for the overnight mail so the documents could get signed and overnighted back. That's gone. Those messengers don't exist anymore, or they're delivering, or they're working for DoorDash, right, or Grubhub. Um, but they're not doing documents for signatures, and that's a good thing, right? They're doing other things, and so as we worry about what is technology going to do to the workforce, that's a basic application in the legal world, right? I used to be the kid on the copy machine, or the kid on the fax machine feeding pages in. There are better things for me to be doing. Thank goodness. I went to college, I went to law school, right? But there are better things even for people who are um, less educated and don't have graduate degrees, who can be really doing some pretty incredible things with AI. And we hear a lot about people starting new businesses with AI that they couldn't have started because they didn't have the bandwidth to do all the things that needed to be done. So I think it's actually really exciting. And I think it's going to be embraced, and that's happening more and more. And I think legislators are going to eventually come around to the fact that um, there are more opportunities than risks.
Mm. We kind of, had a new election, a sea change, or difference is coming. Kind
Yes.
of, what are you saying, with your clients, and kind of what do you guys focus on nationwide here as you begin this year?
Um, I mean, I'll be candid. We don't spend a lot of time focusing nationwide, but there are trends nationwide, and those trends are important because sometimes, if you have a client or if you have a company who's got a business, right, they might be facing the same issue in 6 or 7 states. And so, what are those issues that are coming up? Um, there's a whole lot of issues around data centers. Well, let me say the first issue today, for those of us who know anybody who lives in Southern California, is the same issue for those of us who have friends in North Carolina or East Tennessee, right, from the last disaster. I think we're going to have a lot of people focusing on disaster relief. We're going to have a lot of folks focusing on whether federal FEMA funding is adequate to really help us out. People are focusing on flood insurance and homeowners insurance in places like Florida, where homeowners insurance is going away because of so many disasters. I think our economy, from a macro perspective, is grappling with what does government really have the funding to do, whether it's school budgets because COVID funding has run out, whether it's disaster relief funding, affordable housing and childcare. Um, and I say that as somebody who grew up, I'm not opposed to any of these things. I'm saying this is something that government really, really, really has to grapple with. And so that's across the board. I think on social issues, we're seeing it's not just AI with regard to technology, right? There's more and more communities and I think states that are going to prohibit cell phones in schools or are going to manage cell phones in schools because they're finding that the kids just aren't learning to the degree they used to be. I think there's issues around college affordability. There's issues around responsible gaming, as DraftKings and FanDuel have taken off, and other competitors in the online gambling space, right? The online sports, fantasy sports space, whether it's called a skill game or gaming. There's a whole lot of issues around responsible gaming. Um, so across the board, those are sort of national issues that we're seeing trending. And AI, there's a multi-state working group with 45 states represented, and there were 460 bills I think last year in state legislatures. There will
Yeah.
probably be at least that many this year.
It's kinda interesting. It seems like everyone just wants to introduce a bill just to validate, but don't even know what the bill is for or why they're introducing it or what it does. You kinda saw that here last year, where they're all just kinda stumbling around with their various AR bills, and, one passed about deepfakes, right? And it was overturned by the courts, as speech, which is interesting. California specific, what are you and your clients, riffing at here in California as a lot of legislators here like to be very active and make that they quote unquote "lead the way" on their issues.
So I think across the board, there's certainly in California efforts to protect California from the new administration, the Trump administration. I think there's going to be um, tremendous focus in the legislature. No matter what you wanted to be doing, you have to be focused on the LA fire, right? And the LA fires. And you have to be focused on disaster relief. And you have to be focused on what can we do as an economy and as a state to protect ourselves or to protect citizens or to buffer folks from these risks. Um, I'm not sure there's air in the room for a lot of other things in the first several weeks of this session that's coming up. Um, um, so I think beyond that, you will always have in California affordable housing issues. You're always going to have access to healthcare issues, and college affordability issues. Um, and in the AI world, right? The governor signed several AI bills last year, and in several states, there were, or at least a good solid handful of states. AI bills were signed into law on things like elections. There were a few copyright related bills, copyright adjacent bills. There's clearly going to be a focus on In terms of the slicing, the small bills, the narrow bills, there's going to be a focus on um, deep fakes with regards to pornography, right? Or abusive sexting and things like that. Pornography sorts of abuses using AI. Um, I think that the broad bills, right? We saw 1047 in California get vetoed by the governor last year. There's certainly Senator Weiner put in a bill this year that's a placeholder, and I don't think there's text yet for that bill, but it reflects the fact that he may come back and run that bill again or run a modification of that bill. I expect that there will be additional bills on algorithmic bias and data bias. There's going to be bills on worker displacement. And as you were saying, there's a whole lot of folks across the country putting in a whole lot of bills. And I won't say that, I think you referenced that you suggested some folks might be doing it to appear to be relevant or to get in the game and things like that. I think that people are hearing from their constituents. And when they hear from their constituents, they feel it's important to respond. And then obviously some bills move forward and some bills lag and some bills get consolidated and things like that. So I do think there's going to be a lot of hearings. There's going to be a lot of noise. California is unusual in that there's a very, very long legislative session, which means crises can be addressed or early, the noise can sort of has time to percolate and for people to hear and to process and to resolve themselves into saying, let's move only certain bills forward, rather than trying to rush pell-mell everything over the line because they only have a 60-day session or a
Yeah.
90-day session.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I just kind of remembering back to when Trump was in office last. It seemed like every week there was something new that made you forget it happened the week before. And already this year, the speakers already announced that we had to require less bills because they're really going to reflect us on kind of some of the issues you're talking about, kicking healthcare in them. And now you have this fire, right? That's going to unleash a whole new set of legislation and goes back to start, how to file as corp and maybe here to look at that. And, in another 30 days, who knows what we're dealing with this year. If we still remember what happened on it. So, I think we're all prepared for kind of a exciting year as it's Maple Week. So it should be interesting. Um, one thing a lot of the tech representatives talk about is kind of how the United States and California historically is, some of our success in the tech space is due to kind of our lack of regulation. Um, do you see that kind of changing? We're looking to regulate now, be kind of more like Europe rather than kind of what they've done in the past, kind of, let these technologies take form and then kind of figure out them.
I don't see it changing. I think that we have I won't say permissionless based economy, but there are laws. Our model in the United States is everything's legal unless it's illegal. And there's other places where your rights, your individual rights, your business rights, your economic rights are bestowed upon you by the government rather than the government setting limits, right? Rather than natural rights being you can do what you want, right? You have freedom until somebody says you don't have freedom. And I think when it comes to innovation, we don't in the United States have historically not had the government say, don't go there, right? We've had them say, don't do bad things with that technology, right? Don't steal music with the technology. Don't use technology to inflict violence. But when you have multi-purpose technology, and for instance, servers are multi-purpose technology, right? Servers are not regulated. The cloud is not regulated. Financial data on the cloud is regulated or on a server. Financial, personal health data is regulated on the cloud or on a server. The same is true with an index card. It was regulated when you kept it on an index card in the doctor's office or on paper files, right? Similarly, if you use healthcare data in the AI environment, you still have to follow HIPAA. Nothing's changed, except the way you're perusing the data or processing the data or slicing and dicing the data so that you can learn more from it and perhaps personalize a treatment for an individual patient. If you can process more data and get more sample sizes of similar symptoms, then perhaps you can get a more targeted solution for a patient. The fact that you're doing that in the cloud or using AI software or more powerful software than you did yesterday or last year doesn't mean you do or don't have to um, comply with HIPAA. You still have to comply. You still have to keep patient data private. And the fact that you're processing it differently shouldn't change that and doesn't change it. And so then the question becomes, do we need new healthcare privacy laws that are AI oriented? Or do our old healthcare privacy laws still work? So I think we don't need an authorization from the government to do things. We've historically not, going back to your original question, but do we need special laws to restrict things that we've previously restricted under old laws?
It's kind of interesting when you were talking about, and I'm just thinking on all these kind of what they call disruptive technologies really came about, as I recall, with Uber. And you had all these, people who started using Uber and we all loved it. We're like, wow, you can, get a ride anywhere, like Instagram, and not have to call a cab and wait 40 minutes, have cash on you. And then it kind of came into question about, well, is Uber like, Uber or, all these cabbies are paying for these licenses and medallions. And we kind of found a way to kind of grandfather it in. And kind of, you're talking about the music industry. I think you had a number of record store. Yeah, Rosie. Blockbuster Video, Netflix is taking over. So kind of like, I guess kind of looking to the future here of, AI and all this new technology, self-driving cars, you know, becoming more and more of a possibility. Kind of, what kind of disruptive technologies are you seeing here today that might kind of be cause of an issue? Kind of, I guess, kind of float these gray areas of the law. That we could be addressing here in the near future.
I'm smiling because you mentioned gray areas.
Yeah.
And I think that um, that's one of the questions is, are there gray areas? Are there white spaces? So I was in a round table a few weeks ago in Oregon, and there were some startups there, and there were some big companies and some AI sort of software ethicists, data ethicists types of folks. And one of the people in the room suggested to the legislators, look for the white spaces, look for the places where there's gaps in the law before, right? And as I was just saying, healthcare privacy, we have really good laws. Do we really need an AI healthcare privacy law, or is there something unique going on that we need a very narrow fix for? And so I would argue that there's probably fewer gray areas and in the economy and white spaces in the law that we need to be gap filling, but that's the analysis that we have to do rather than doing sweeping laws about regulating, frontier models of AI. We didn't regulate Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or things like that just because they were frontier models of AI. I'm sorry, frontier models of document storage or content storage or Flickr versus, right. We don't have the old photomat photo booths in the parking lot near the CVS anymore because people are printing their photos at home. So I think that in terms of disruptive technologies, I mean, look, you referenced self-driving cars. I was literally this weekend, we have one car in the shop at home, and I was thinking, gee, it would be great if I could drive myself to the office and the car could drive itself back home so that it's not sitting in a garage for 12 hours or 8 hours. And then my wife could use that car during the day and
Yeah.
then it could come back to the office and pick me up, right? That, what does that mean? That means I'm only going to need to buy one car instead of two. That's pretty disruptive. That's pretty transformative for the auto industry. If that was to be, if that was to really take off.
Yeah, and then
Uh,
traffic too, right?
yeah, I mean, it might be more traffic because, but maybe less because she was going to be out driving anyway. It's now that she's doing it with the same car rather than a different car while my car was sitting in the garage. It might actually not change traffic. I don't have really easy answers to that. Um, but I think that, you know, I think that there are some fascinating AI technologies. There are, for instance, there's a company in California that has a software that sits on the health insurance screen when a nurse is making outbound calls to for instance, moms who've just given birth to say, hey, how's it going? What's going on? Are you feeling good? Is the baby sleeping? How's your breastfeeding going? If that's what your preference is, right? What's going on? And the software that sits on that screen alerts the nurse if the patient, and by the way, the patient, is this full disclosure, but if the patient starts talking in ways or using specific words or phrases, or their voice changes in different ways that indicate that person might need to get some outreach from a behavioral health specialist. Person might be in distress, even though they're not saying they're in distress, they might be in distress. And that might be an intervention that needs to be made, right? That's a signal that's using AI. And that's pretty cool. That has that has the opportunity with postpartum moms who are often in distress and often keeping it quiet. Um, that's a great technology, right? There's great technologies that say and great companies that are being built. How do we help non-traditional earners demonstrate that they are financeable, that they are credit worthy, that they'll pay back a loan, whether it's a business loan or a mortgage? What about how do we help people who are in the cash economy or in the off-book economy, right? In the underground economy, however you want to call it, right? Whatever phrase you want to use. There are people who don't have 1099s, right? Or W-2s, right? Or they've got a raft of them because they work in the gig economy for a bunch of different providers. How do we create a system where they are credit worthy when they are good folks who pay their loans back, or who are likely to pay their loans back? And those sorts of technologies that can consolidate lots and lots of data and create paths to opportunity for where the opportunity didn't exist before. That we're always going to have financial institutions making some bad loans. If we can reduce it, and if we can show them that what they historically thought were bad loans, but are actually good loans, that's a real opportunity. It's an opportunity for people. It's an opportunity for financial services companies. It's an opportunity for marginalized communities to really create opportunities internally. So we're seeing some really, really great technologies. I saw a company in Oregon called Hirely.ai, started by a guy who got rejected for, he said, 4,000 jobs that he applied for. 4,000. But when he switched the name on his resume from Mickle to Michael, suddenly interviews started coming. And so he created a software that removes the bias from job application reviews, from evaluations of resumes and things like that. Now, how does it do that? Maybe it removes things about where you went to high school or where you went to college if it was a HBCU. Maybe it removes things about your zip code or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but that's really good for some communities. Now, there might be reasons why we want bias, right? Maybe I want to know if you went to a school that has a great reputation in this area, and that's not a bias, or it's a bias that's actually an advantage to you. So how does it make those decisions? I'm not sure. But the intent of the AI is to remove bias. And so when legislators say, well, we have very great concerns about AI promoting bias and AI having algorithmic bias and data bias, there are lots of companies out there that are using AI to reduce bias and to help people recognize their own biases as they make, performance evaluations, or as they interact with their teams, and coaching AI technologies. So I think those are really, really interesting. There's a lot of AI being used in the nonprofit community. I know somebody who is, I ran into somebody, met them and spent some time with them. They're using AI to help nonprofits accelerate the pace and accelerate the quality, improve the quality of their fundraising solicitations. That saves people time. It raises more money for organizations that are doing good work. That's all a good thing.
Yeah.
And so the
You can use it for
opportunity,
grant writing, looking for opportunities. It's just like
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
oh yeah. So I think we have to embrace those and understand that if we regulate AI broadly and generally, we're imposing burdens on those companies also. And that might not be what we want to do. What we might want to do is try to focus on how is AI being misused, how is AI being abused, or used in an abusive way. And once again, focus on the behaviors, focus on the results, not focus on the technology, right? The technology can be used for good and bad. Let's focus on making the bad actors or the bad actions illegal. And if
Right.
they already are, do we need to re-regulate them or create layered regulation to say, no, 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 we really mean it this time? I'm not sure we need to do that.
Yeah. Can you kinda talk to us about, I've talked to a lot of tech founders and, they're in such a little kind of bubble of engineering, business, and capital raises that laws and government just is totally another world, and they don't get it, and they usually don't really start to, even understand it until it's too late and they're in the midst of a project. Can you kinda talk about kinda working with some of these technology groups and kinda helping them, find representation and kinda work through the system, kind of their reactions or regulations and whatever?
Yeah. We last year in Colorado, as you know, Colorado passed a very broad AI bill, which I think is in line to be significantly amended this year. But we worked with a lot of startups, and we worked with them through a couple of folks who were conveners, right, who ran meetup groups and things like that with a lot of founders and developers. And when we shared the bill with these folks and they circulated, it was like a mini explosion within the LinkedIn groups, right? Or within the meetup groups. And when the founder of the group would call a conference call, 15 people, 20 people were on it. And they were reading these bills and saying, "Oh my goodness, this is insanity," right? These people don't understand AI. They don't understand software. They don't understand the development process. They don't understand product management. They don't understand um, all the good things that right? They were saying we developers, we founders, right? And in many ways, they're evangelists, right? They're problem solvers. They don't understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we do it, and how this would impose incredible burdens on us. And many of these folks testified in the Colorado legislature. There were op-eds written. There were group letters submitted. Similarly, in California, we work with a startup that um, his weather data AI product is like a microclimate weather predictor so that you on your farm, you don't care what the weather is in your zip code. You care what the weather is going to be on your farm. And if it's going to rain on your farm, you're not going to put fertilizer down because it's going to wash away. And that's big money and it's big pollution if the fertilizer all runs into the groundwater, or not the groundwater, into the, off into the river. So but he's also a PhD mathematician. And, his testimony when he went to Sacramento was this is math. This is linear algebra. You can't regulate math. You can regulate what people do with it, but you can't, but math is math. And that's, so that's when you get to the most personal, passionate founder, they're just perplexed. And they did not know, they generally don't know these things are coming down the pike. This 30 or 40 states that are going to have AI legislation. Many of them have either significant or at least pockets of significant startup communities and software startup communities. Um, Most of those folks don't know what's coming. And one of the things that we are doing at RXN is helping them, is alerting them, frankly, and telling them that that they need to get in the game because there are very, very big companies, Google, Meta, OpenAI, that are building gigantic, right? There's trillionaire companies building billionaire systems. That's what legislators are afraid of. What legislators don't understand oftentimes is that there are constituents in their district, in their city, in their state, who are also building AI models. We're building small AI models, industry specific AI models, solution specific AI models, or who are using those big models to solve problems, healthcare problems, education problems, all sorts of interesting problems in their communities safely, really without creating risk, and delivering real value to their communities that they care about, the communities that those legislators care about. It is very, very important for small companies and for founders to tell their stories to legislators. And we spend a lot of time with those communities of founders trying to introduce them to communities of legislators.
No, no, that's very, very well put. As one legislature one told me is, you're not going to know about the problem if you never tell us. So getting your voice out there is definitely important. And how do you find these startups and get the word out to them so that they, I guess, know to activate, know who you mean?
Some of it's just hard work, just it's almost like old-fashioned community organizing, right? You look on the internet, you find them, call people who you know, who you know, who you know, and you get bounced around to different folks, and then you find somebody. I will tell you that in one state, um, right, we talked to one founder who introduced us to one person, and they introduced us to four people, and it's just like the old-fashioned game of telephone, right? All of a sudden, you find people who are conveners and who are trusted within those communities. That's the key, is to find trusted people within those communities, because they're not interested in listening to me. They don't know me. But if I can persuade, if I can show people this is the bill that's being introduced, this is the bill that's having a hearing, in 3 days or in 3 weeks, or there's 40 of these bills. Let's talk about which ones are really important and which ones might actually really, really take a bite out of your specific business or your friends' businesses. Um, but you got to be able to crack that door open and be trusted. I think it helps the fact that we've worked on this issue in California, in North Carolina, and um, in Illinois, in Colorado. I've been doing technology legislation at the federal level for, like I said, since internet music, so since the 90s.
That's funny. One thing you said at the RXN Group you guys do is you connect clients kind of like to lobbyists in states. And how do you know who to hire? You're looking for a lobbying firm in a particular area. How do you know who to find and who to talk to?
Um, Referrals, history, you interview them, right? The best lobbyists. So there are some organizations, there's some multi-state organizations that might have a go-to lobbyist in a specific state, right? One, we have one or two or three or more in every state, but as a recovering lawyer, right? I look at conflicts very aggressively.
Yeah.
Right? I don't just say,
Which
oh,
don't always follow in the lobbying world.
there's client relations issues and there's conflicts. So, but there's also, right, there's some lobbyists who are really, really terrific at playing defense. And there's fewer that are really good at playing offense and passing bills. There's some lobbyists that are really, really good at healthcare, and there's some that are really, really good at technology. And you have to vet them. You have to vet them just like you would if you were hiring your own lawyer or your own lobbyist. We put ourselves in the shoes of the client, and we are helping them manage their lobbying teams. We're an outsourced team in a sense. We're like their outsourced government affairs team, but we treat ourselves as if we're in-house. Their money, we're very, very careful with our clients' money. It's very important to negotiate good deals with the lobbying firms, to be fair, to make sure there's real transparency, to vet them for conflicts, to push them on strategy. And in fairness to the lobbyists, right? Some of them are working in 60 and 90-day sessions, but they've got 15 clients. They can only get so deep on the substance because they've got 15 clients in 90 days. And that's all really reasonable. So we try to help them by always being a resource and helping them with, the one pagers, right? We don't expect most of the state lobbying firms to be writing one pagers. We're drafting them for them and letting them come back and say, okay, let's localize it this way, or let's remember that we passed a bill in our state a year ago that tweaks this, right? But if we can be a resource that can be that can be both supportive and helping the state lobbyists in this lobbyists in the states really, really succeed, as well as help the client get great value, and have a lot of wins in the states, right? We're really serving both sides, and that's our goal.
No. And you were talking about all this stuff the states might do. Kind of glossed over what's going to happen in kind of the federal government. I guess kind of we have this kind of year, uh, I guess sweeping deregul deregulation kind of wins. You had tech billionaires cozying up with the president quite uh, interestingly. Mark Zuckerberg changing everything he's doing and copying kind of Mr. Musk moving his group to Texas as well. Kind of what do you see federally, and do you see the federal government doing something that might prohibit the states from kind of working on their own issues?
Preemption is always a big deal. Everybody wants the feds to preempt the states when the states are doing things they don't like. And they don't want the feds to preempt the states when the states are doing things they do like. So sometimes there's purity and principle, and sometimes there's convenience and, what issue are we talking about today? I I think that um, I think the House of Representatives is going to be a very interesting place with the moderate Republicans and the very, very, very conservative fiscally Republicans. And then a lot of folks in between who are MAGA Republicans, right? Do they get to the majority that they need in order to pass bills, in order to pass very large bills? Obviously, in the Senate, you've got the need to 60 on everything except budget reconciliation for the most part. Do they get to 60? Or do they just shovel everything into one gigantic, big, beautiful bill, as our
Big,
president-elect has
beautiful, yeah.
suggested, right? And get it all done with 51 votes, or the 453 Republican votes. I think they have 53 senators once the last senator gets sworn in a few more days. So in the House, I think in a couple of days there's going to be some confirmations, and the House is going to have a 1 vote margin or a 0 vote margin, until some special elections get done. Um, you know, so so look, the Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. Um, Control of the Senate doesn't mean you have 60, and control of the House in terms of party doesn't mean you have the votes, majority plus one, on every bill that goes through. So I think we're going to see a lot of internal Republican Party challenges, and what's going to be the outcome? I don't have an answer. But what I hope is that folks actually start talking nicely to each other and playing in the sandbox together, so that we can have legislation passing rather than just, who wins the tweet of the day contest.
Right. Just boom. Clicks. Metric viewers. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. Very interesting stuff. And I'll be excited to see kind of what takes shape this year.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again one day.
Definitely. And if some of our listeners want to reach out to you, find out more about the RXN Group, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm at Jon, at therxngroup.com. You can obviously look us up on the web. I'm on LinkedIn. Hit me up. Always happy to talk.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.